The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.
Indeed. Welcome to the Wrestling Time Machine podcast. I'm your host, Paul Leazar. If you found this, hopefully it's launch day on W2Mnet. If you're finding it later, then just, welcome and salutations and all that fun stuff that comes with a new project finding its feet and leaping off the ground. If you're listening to this, hopefully you found the article portion. If you haven't, there's an article portion. And that's sort of what this episode's going to be about, mostly an introduction to who I am, an introduction to what this podcast / article hybrid sort of thing is going to be about, and all that cool stuff. And hopefully I'll make you laugh, and we'll have a couple of jokes thrown in here and there, because Lord knows I'm a silly person. And I'll make myself laugh and giggle, of course, too. So here we are, the Wrestling Time Machine podcast. This is an idea I've had for some time that's sort of dated back to the predecessor of Wrestling to the Max itself, DirtSheets.com, is a project that ultimately didn't really find its feet, but it did spawn Wrestling to the Max, and that's why most of us are still here today. And essentially what happened then is I was tasked to come up with an idea for an article to write, which ultimately I settled on the Superstar Highlight at the time, which was me running down an entire person's career, chronicling it, going over championships they won, big moments, all that cool stuff that you do whenever you talk about a wrestler. And before that all sort of went away, I had an idea to expand that to what this will be about. The Wrestling Time Machine is going to be hosted by myself, of course, and maybe some other people down the road, but I don't know yet how all that's going to work out. But what we're going to do first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So, outside of going to school and universities and colleges and life itself, doing the Wrestling to the Max podcast is something that I've done for 3.5 years now, and essentially it's the longest thing I've ever done, employment, whatever else, outside of education. Inside of education, I'm classically trained as a historian. I have a bachelor's degree in that. I've written a lot of papers. Nothing's been published, of course, but I've had a lot of writing practice. I've done a lot of reading, chronicles, people, places, also all that fun stuff you do when you're in school, and you realize that absolutely none of that has anything to do with what's going on in the real world today, of course. But what I'm trying to get at is that history is about storytelling. It's about the story of humanity. It's about the story of how we get from point A to point B, right? The other big thing that I've sort of been into is pro wrestling, of course. Like I said, I've been on the Wrestling to the Max podcast for some time. I've been a wrestling fan for over 20 years. I think this is year 23 or 24 if we're keeping track. And in that time, of course, I've watched so much wrestling from so many different parts of the world and so many different promotions with different takes on what wrestling should be and presentation and all that fun stuff that you get into whenever you talk nerdy about wrestling. So somewhere in between those two cross sections of pro wrestling and history is where the Wrestling Time Machine comes to meet. And what I want to do is go over an entire year's worth of shows from a promotion. I have access to, this being 2016, you have so many subscription services out there. You have so many places to download content. Not to mention, I have tons of DVDs and VHSs of all sorts of different wrestling shows. Yes, I started tape trading and collecting when I was very young. So if you don't know what a VHS is, go ask your brothers, your sister, your folks, your parents, whoever you live with who was around before you. What's a VHS? They'll probably show you because they probably still have 3,000 of them because I don't know anybody who got rid of all of them yet. But anyways, I digress. What's going to happen here is you'll have the article that I write. It'll go over whatever we're going over on that episode of the podcast, be it whatever we're watching together. WWF, WCW, Ring of Honor, TNA, Progress, whatever. I have a whole bunch of choices down below, which we'll get to in the meantime. So, chronicling everything is what the article is going to be about. You'll have the written reviews. I'm going to do match rankings. So, obviously, I'll rank everything like I do on all my other reviews for W2Mnet, which encompass Lucha Underground, and I'm going to do Progress and Ring of Honor, of course, which I already have a fair bit of that up there. And it'll be sort of in that same vein, right? And then we'll have a total ranking running the entire year. So, for example, like the first choice I have on here, WWF 1993, we'll watch Superstars. We'll get into the start of Raw there, and we'll rank every single match that they do. I'll cut it down to probably a top 10, and that way you'll have the 10 best matches from that year. And I'll probably have some show recommendations and all this other stuff. We'll get into all that as time goes on, but on the flip side of that, you'll have this podcast. And if you prefer the written word and all that, then that's great. If you prefer to have something to take with you on the go, maybe you just like me for whatever reason, or maybe you just, prefer podcasts, which is great because I love doing podcasts. I've had a lot of fun doing Wrestling the Max over the years, and that's where this part comes in. Obviously I'll review and talk about the show on here, but it'll be much more casual, much more freeform, much less constricted, to a written review, which has, you have A, B, and C points you have to hit on those, and you want to make sure you're getting your point across. And when you are able to write about it and when you talk about it, you get two very different things, which is something you get in storytelling. For example, the oldest story known to mankind is Beowulf, right? And Beowulf obviously wasn't written down for a very long time, but in the very beginning of time and storytelling and people gathering around fires and stuff like that, people told Beowulf, and of course the story might have changed from here and there, but you get a very different experience when you listen to somebody tell you the story of Beowulf or when you read the story, right? And that's kind of what I'm going for here. You get two very different approaches, but hopefully when you smash the two together, you get a much richer experience. And I'm not saying you need to read the article and listen to this to get the full experience, because if I'm doing it right, you can do one or the other. And if you just read the article, you'll have a full picture. If you listen to the podcast, you'll have a full picture. But if you do both, hopefully what I'm achieving here is a much richer, much more colorful perspective where you get sort of the full gambit of everything, And we'll see if I can actually accomplish that. Of course, it's a lofty goal. I've never seen anybody try this before. And if you have a link or a website or a podcast that does that, then shoot it my way, of course. But certainly I don't know of anybody in all the time I've spent poking around the internet and 13 years now, 14 years, poking around wrestling websites and all that good stuff. So without further gilding the lily or probably confusing you with my rambling diatribe here about what exactly I'm trying to accomplish, let's just get to the fun part, right? As I said, we're going to be going over an entire year's worth of shows for a promotion. I have access to a whole lot, obviously, as I've said, and the choices are based around that. And what I want is for you, the listener, or the reader, or both, to have a say in this. So hopefully there will be a poll within the article on the W2Mnet.com website. There will be one in the Wrestling of the Max Facebook group, which sort of serves as a hub for everything we do wrestling-wise on W2M, I'm assuming. So we'll have all those votes there, of course, and we'll see who wins, and we'll go forward from there. And hopefully once we achieve a full year's worth of reviews, we'll have a vote to keep going with it next year, or we'll move right along into a different promotion. And hopefully we'll keep it varied, and if you're enjoying the journey, we'll keep going. If not, then we'll leave it behind, and we'll hop in the time machine, and we'll go somewhere else, right? So here are the choices. First choice, World Wrestling Federation, World Wrestling Entertainment, whatever you want to call it, 1993, the beginning of the new generation. This this time period is very special to me. It's when I first found wrestling, sitting at my neighbor's house, watching SummerSlam 1993 was my very first wrestling show I ever saw. And we'll start at the beginning, and Raw hasn't even been established yet. Superstars on Saturday, if I remember, Saturday or Sunday, is the flagship, and we'll start there, and we'll go all the way till the formation of Raw, where Raw is the B show, which is a strange world that nobody, I'm sure, has ever lived through, unless you're my age, 28 or so. Yeah, yeah. We'll say we'll just go with my age. That's fair. And we'll start with the beginning of Monday, which is it's a fun ride through '93. I mean, it's wrestling so different. It's garnered towards younger kids. You have these colorful characters, and amongst all of that, you have Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon and Diesel and all sorts of stuff. And Hulk Hogan's big moving around from WWF to WCW, and it's a wild ride. It's a wild ride, and one of my favorite. It's probably still my favorite time for pro wrestling. Yeah, so WWF 1993 is your first choice. Second choice, World Championship Wrestling 1995, The Birth of Nitro. Of course, this is the beginning of the Monday Night War, but I think most people don't usually sit through all of 1995. They usually probably either jump right to 96 or they just start at Nitro and go forward. And you miss a lot because obviously, as I said in the previous one, Hulk Hogan jumped ship to World Championship Wrestling in 93. I believe he starts showing up for them a little later that year, and you sort of, he takes over the stage, and WCW, I don't want to say flounders, but they struggle to find an identity, right? Until 95 and in the early parts of 96. They finally strike on something, and that something is Nitro, building around Nitro, building around more stars outside of Hogan. But 95 is a great year for WCW, mostly because you hear so much bad stuff about the end. You don't hear a lot about the beginning, and this is far from the beginning. Obviously, WCW is a long and storied promotion, but the beginning year of Nitro and all that, I feel like that it kind of gets glossed over. So we'll go over all that fun stuff, and we'll get to watch some Saturday Night, the Mothership, as Dusty Rhodes used to call it. So that will also be a good time if that is the road we choose to glide on down in the time machine there. And then a lot of these next ones are independent promotions from 2002, and you'll see that across these next 3 or 4, as 2002 being the start date for them, because obviously 2001 WCW closes, ECW closes, WWF, WWE is the only one, they're the only big fish in the pond, right? And so the spotlight shifts from them to the internet and the real, I think, rise of independent wrestling. And you have Ring of Honor is the first one, Ring of Honor 2002. They jump out of the shadow of ECW, founded by RF Videos owner Rob Feinstein, who was looking to fill the void in RF Video's tape library that ECW left, because when ECW died, they lost a lot of their tape, a lot of their bestseller. ECW sold so much product and all that. So they open Ring of Honor, and they have a very varied, maybe not varied, a very up and down go from the start. Excuse me. Which we'll get into if that is the one that wins. It's interesting. The opening years of Ring of Honor, some really great wrestling, of course, but some very, very odd characters in there too. So worth a look. Also worth a look, TNA 2002, which is the next choice on here. In 2001, you have a lot of promotions sort of try to step up and fill voids. CZW opened in 99, and they sort of, after ECW dies, they try to fill that void, but take it another step higher, with Cage of Death and all this other stuff, which maybe down the road we'll visit CZW, but TNA 2002 is so interesting. Not only is TNA obviously still around, much like Ring of Honor is, TNA in 2002, excuse me, is very interesting. It's very interesting. Jeff Jarrett, after running around with World Wrestling All Stars in Australia, sort of opts to come back home to the States after touring with them and being their champion, and opens TNA with his dad, Jerry Jarrett, and they run weekly pay-per-views, which is something no other promotion's really done before or since, probably because it costs so much money. And they sort of take over the NWA spotlight. You have the NWA World Title, the tag titles coming up. You have the formation of the X Division, which is really the best reason I can give you to want to watch these, because the early X Division stuff is absolutely incredible. But the heavyweight and tag team scene are just as interesting, because you have all these people that WWF didn't sign from WCW and ECW showing up. Vince Russo and his craziness, and excuse me, all sorts of other things happening. So, equally as fun a ride, I think, as Ring of Honor, but more on that strange side, and maybe more big time, because obviously you're at like Sandman and Raven and Kurt Hennig and Razor Ramon or Scott Hall, all sorts of different people showing up. Of course, with Jeff Jarrett and that start at the head of that line. Next choice, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla 2002. PWG is so very different because, one, it's on the West Coast. Most of everything else we've talked about's been on the East Coast. They have that solid foundation. Philly, New York, all these other places. TNA obviously runs out of Tennessee in the first years, but still decidedly East Coast. California sort of was, I don't want to say isolated, but it's doing its own thing, right? They have their own indie scene. They have, Excalibur, Joey Ryan, Super Dragon, Scott Lost, the PWG 6, right? I'm forgetting two people, obviously. Disco Machine. Anyways, those 6 guys, they're sort of your bigger names, and they open PWG, one, so they can bring these bigger name East Coast talents that are coming up in Ring of Honor and all these other, ECWA, all these other promotions over there, and they're bringing them over to the West Coast to perform on PWG and give other talent in California, specifically Southern California, a sort of a larger stage to perform on. And they come out swinging in this first year. They have these great matches. They have a tournament to crown a champion. And they have this very interesting mix with TNA, which TNA has a great mixture, a interesting relationship with Ring of Honor in these first couple of years too, before we get into the big Feinstein Gate thing that causes a lot of turnover for not only Ring of Honor, but changes TNA's relationship with them too. And PWG sort of falls a little victim to that too. So I mean, PWG's 2002 is a great year. Lots of good wrestling, lots of long matches. Like 30 minutes is fairly common for their bigger matches, and it can become a bit of a drag sometimes, but equally as fun. Not to mention, it's very different too. Obviously, it's a very different presentation from everything else we've talked about. And then we step into very different territory with these last 2 choices. Chikara 2002 or 2003 is the next choice. Chikara's on here not only because it's my favorite indie promotion out there. It's very reminiscent of the new generation in that it has these colorful characters. It uses a lot of Lucha Libre, obviously, with that. But Chikara is an interesting evolution from a wrestling promotion that started out essentially as a wrestling school, and Chikara was the promotion for those guys to work out of. But it grows into this wonderful mid-tier promotion, and finally into the top indie promotion that it is today, with its own subscription service and pay-per-views and all sorts of stuff that Chikara's really blown up in the last 3-4 years. And we'll start at the beginning with the initial class, and we'll cover both 2002 and 2003, mostly because 2002 Chikara shows that have been released to the public are only its first 2 shows, which is the Renaissance Dawns, and we'll get into 2003 and all that fun stuff too. But it's such an interesting journey. It's so very different from everything else that's out there too, and it's a great experience. And if you love wacky and colorful and very different Chikara is totally a place to be. Last but not least, obviously, I wanted to include some women's wrestling. There's no better than Shimmer, in my opinion, so we'll cover Shimmer's Volume 1 through 12 if they win. Shimmer, I think Shimmer is sort of the evolution of women's wrestling in 2005, where WWE was sort of on the verge of doing what they're trying to do now, with Trish and Lita, and you have Jazz and Victoria and all these other girls at the top of the ladder over there. And Shimmer is sort of working its way out of this hole that women's wrestling has been in the States since forever. And they tape shows across weekends. They're releasing them as DVDs. They're dubbed volumes. We'll cover volumes 1 through 12, which is the beginning of the promotion all the way to the culmination of crowning the first Shimmer champion in the tournament. There's some absolutely dynamite wrestling on these shows, especially the early matches of Sarah Del Rey and Mercedes Martinez are just absolutely dynamite, and we'll see some familiar faces on it. For example, Beth Phoenix is on the first 2 volumes, who she actually got spotted in these shows, and that's how she got signed to WWE. But yeah, we'll work our way out, and it's great. If you want to see the evolution sort of women's wrestling on an independent level, growing to what it is today, there's no better place to look than Shimmer. And I do have another option on there if this somehow wins, enough people get behind another promotion that I can easily find access to, easily get an entire year's worth of shows. I will certainly be more than open to covering that. And there'll be another spot on the W2M Facebook group poll. There'll be one hopefully on the website, or you can email me, hailtothechimp78@gmail.com. I'll if you send it to me through there, or if you send any of your choices through there, please, I will check that and add it to the tally. And those are the choices. There's a lot of great choices on there to be had. I'm really looking forward to this. The poll will be open till probably about September 19th or so. Maybe a little later, maybe a little shorter, depending on how many votes I get and all this stuff. Obviously, if nobody gets behind this, then I'll just pick a year, and I'll pick a promotion, and we'll just go forward from there. But I really hope we get a lot of votes on this. I really hope we get a lot of participation, because I want as many people engaged as possible. And let's face it, we're going on a journey together, guys. We're going down an entire year of promotions work, and it could be short, it could be long, depending on what wins. Obviously, WWF and WCW would be a much longer road to walk down, or travel down with our Wrestling Time Machine. So, this is, I think it's been a good episode. Hopefully you weren't too bored. Hopefully I've set the stage well and explained myself thoroughly. Obviously this is a shorter episode too, being an intro and an origin. And this will be coupled with the article on W2Mnet.com too. So all that's there. This will get better too. Obviously, I'll have a theme and hopefully a bit more structure going forward than just me rambling for 23 minutes about whatever's going on with the show. But it's gonna be a good time, guys. I'm really looking forward to doing this. I hope you are too. Please vote. Please, just comment to me too whether you like the show or not. And please, of course, check out the other shows on the W2M network. Lots of great stuff on not only Wrestling to the Max, but we have Football to the Max, Football 5. Tons of other shows, Jobbers Court, Squid and Iggy, I think, Squid and Izzy, something like that. Lots and lots of great shows out there. More content to be added soon. If you want to be a part of the W2M network, of course, email us, contact us through our website, w2mnet.com. Easy enough for me to say. And if we think you can fill the void that we have, man, we'd be more than happy to have you along for the ride. But for now, this has been Paul Leazar. This is the Wrestling Time Machine podcast. I'll be sure to keep the machine full of gas, and we'll start traveling down that road together, guys. So until next time, y'all have a good one.